Hey everyone, in this Let's Create, we will be creating a third-person character. This will involve the character moving and setting up the animations for its idle and run states. Let's begin. In order to follow along with this Let's Create, make sure you have the third-person character imported into your project. After that, make sure you go to the marketplace and search for the Infinity Blade Adversaries, and then add them to your project. Once added, we can begin. We're going to right-click, create a new folder, and call it Blueprints. This will be our own folder to use, so we don't have to click through these ones. After that, we're going to go into the third-person BP folder, Blueprints, and we're going to duplicate the third-person character. We're going to call this BP_grunt character. By duplicating the third-person character, we can easily use it as a template to build on top of. Click this button to show the sources panel, and then we can drag the grunt directly into our own blueprints folder. Make sure you select move here, as if you click copy, it will create a copy, which will mean we'll have two versions of this in the same project, which is a waste of space. Go into your blueprints, and I'm just going to move this to the left a bit, and double click on the BP_grunt character. We're going to go into the viewport, and we're going to change this mannequin out. To change the mannequin out, we can go to the Skeletal Mesh. Any additional skeletal meshes will be located here. So if you're following along with this with a custom character that you developed in Blender or Maya, or 3D editing software, this is where you'll find your character as long as it had a skeletal mesh, meaning you've rigged it. We're going to get the sk_gruntling_avalanche, and you will get this character here. Now you notice it's not moving like the mannequin, and that's because it requires an animation blueprint. An animation blueprint holds all the data and the different states and animations for the character. We can access this animation blueprint through our event graph and then call different animations depending on what's occurring, such as running, idle, death, attacking, all of those things. To set this up, we need to right-click, go to Animation, and click on Animation Blueprint. You'll be greeted by this screen. Don't worry too much about the parent class. What we're after is here, the skeleton. We want the skeleton for the grunt avalanche, so just type in the grunt and then click on this. The reason why it's asking for a skeleton in this first place is because this particular skeleton is associated with all the animations for this grunt here. By clicking OK and then naming this, so we're going to call this our animation blueprint ABP_grunt, and then we can type in avalanche and open it up. You will see in the asset browser on the right all these various animations, and these are all the animations that are attached to the skeleton, if you click here, of this character. The skeleton of this character is located over here. And you can see, if I click on something at the pelvis, you can rotate and see what each of these parts do. If you're new to this, all of these various bones and joints in the skeleton tree have been rigged in a 3D program. That is why we can manipulate it here. In the 3D program, the artist has made a bunch of animations by using various rotations and movements and potentially scales of these bones. We do not have to mess around with any of this for this tutorial, so we're going to go back to our blueprint. Now, this final animation pose is going to take a node, and it's going to be the result of whatever we set up here. So if I was to scroll through, and if I was just typing idle, drag this out, and drag that directly into there as the result, compile, it will play the idle animation. The same for if I was to drag out something like on fire, drag that into result, hit compile, it will do its on fire run. Now, it's not very efficient to work outside in this space. As you can see, it only takes one node at a time. In order to work with the nodes together and create a kind of animation tree, we need to delete these, right click, and we need to create a state machine. This is going to hold all the various states for our animations, so we can go from idle to run, and then we can go from idle to death and run to death, and so on and so forth. So this will be our generic states, and I call it generic just because running and idle are quite generic things. You could have one for combat states and so on. This is going to be just generic states, and I'm going to plug it directly into the result. If you hit compile, you'll notice nothing's really happening, and we get a warning. If you double click on generic states, you will get into this screen. Here you will see the entry node. This is the entry into an animation. What we want to do is drag this into an animation, and the first one we want is generally the idle state. So type in idle, drag this out, and then drag this directly into idle. See where it lights up? Hit compile, and now it's going directly into this idle state. You can also drag in additional states, such as run, and then go from idle into run. Now, you'll see here that it's going directly from idle into run. The problem with this is we only want it to go into run once it's met a condition. In order to meet a condition, we need a boolean or a float or some type of variable or data type that we can use to see if we want to run. In order to do this, we're going to create a variable. We're going to call this can run, and we're going to double click on this transition arrow. So double click on it, drag can run, get, and you'll see here the result is can enter transition. So if this is true, this condition here, it will go directly into run, which is exactly what we want. So hit compile, save, and go back. Now, if we were to set the rest of this up in our blueprint, we could go directly into run, but we could never exit run. So if you left click and drag, we can go back to this idle state, double click, and we can check if can run is false. Now you notice I can't just plug it in. It's not like a switch where you have the true and false and all that stuff. We need to use something different by dragging it out and typing in not. You will get the not boolean, which means if this is not true, enter transition. We have now set it up so if we run, if can run is true, it will go into run, and if it's not true, it will go into idle. Now that our animation blueprint is set up, we need to make sure that we have the animation blueprint on our mesh. So in animation class, click there and find the ABP underscore grunt avalanche. You will notice it will go into an animation, just like the mannequin goes into a default animation. We can now go into the event graph and set everything up. We're going to keep this really simple and use an event tick and use the axis values of the movement, WASD, to see if we are moving. So right click and type event tick. We are then going to access the values for move right and move forward. To do that, just right click and type in move right, and you will get axis values, which will give you a float. We can then type in move forward and get the other axis value. We can drag out from event tick and type in branch for a condition, and then we can check if our move right, which will either be a -1 or +1 depending on A and D, if it's not equal to a float, in this case 0, then we want to be running. If it is equal to 0, which would be false, we don't want it to run. We can do the exact same thing for move forward, not equal to, and we can check if it's not equal to 0. For the condition, we can then use an OR boolean. So if this or this is true or false, do one of the results. In order to access the animations so we can turn can run true or false, we need to left click on our mesh. And the reason why we're going to use the mesh is because it has direct access to the animation mode and the class. So right click, and we're going to get the get anim instance node, and this is going to return a value. This value is going to be what is going to allow us to cast to the ABP, keep messing that up, Gruntling Avalanche. So cast to ABP Grunt Avalanche. We can then use the false node, and we can set up what happens when it's false. So if it's false, we want to drag off and set can run. And of course, we want to set it to false. Up here, we want to just quickly left click and drag and select all this, Control C, Control V, and drag out to true. We can then just make this look a bit better, drag this out there. Oh, actually, instead of that, we can just use this directly and plug it into there because it's the same thing. So for this one, we get can run set to true. Drag that into set, compile, and save. So if these are not equal to 0, it will run. If it is equal to 0, it will stop running and go back into idle. We can now minimize this, and we can delete this third-person character here. We can go into settings, project settings, and we're going to make sure that in the maps and modes, selected game mode, that instead of third-person character, we're using the BP_grunt character. We're going to hit play, and our character pops up. It's now in the idle state. If I was to run, it will do this. You'll notice that the animation is playing, but it's running away from you. That's because the animators set it so it actually runs forward in the animation. In order to fix this problem, we need to lock it in place, and that is to cause the root to lock in place. So if we press escape, go back to content, and we type in here avalanche, or just AVA, you will get all these animations. The only one we're concerned with is the run animation. So if you click here and double click, you will get the run animation, and you'll notice that the animators have set it up so it runs forward. To fix this, we just go to root motion. With root motion, it will run forward. If we lock it, it will run in place. We can then save it, go back to the game. I'm going to press F11 for full screen, and now I can run, and it all works really well. It's constantly transitioning between the idle and run state. Now, the character doesn't have a jump state, but if you were to make a custom character, you can now easily transition between all of the states for your game. Thanks for watching, everyone. I've been really excited to develop this tutorial, as a lot of people were requesting a third-person character setup with animations. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon helps me develop more videos and higher quality videos. All Patreon money goes directly back into this channel. If you'd like to see similar content, make sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.